This video is brought to you by Nvidia, market leaders in cutting-edge GPU hardware that delivers unparalleled performance in new and upcoming games like Marvel Rivals, Kinutsugami Path of the Goddess, and Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail. Stick around to the end of the video to learn more about how Nvidia's hardware and technology will transform the way you play. Marvel Rivals, alrighty, this is a pretty interesting one to talk about. It's all about the layers. Yes, we're gonna do layers with this one. The first layer of the discussion is how much of this is like Overwatch, and the answer is a fuck ton. There is so much Overwatch baked into this that it feels, I'm not going to say like cynical because I think that's unfair, but it's deeply derivative in a way that doesn't do this game any favors because it's naturally going to invite Overwatch comparisons, and Overwatch is a straight up better game than this by every metric. Outside of the appeal of Marvel characters, I don't think Marvel Rivals makes a compelling case for why you might want to play this game instead of Overwatch if you were looking for something like Overwatch. The second layer of this discussion is peeling back that very surface level analysis of this is just Overwatch with Marvel characters, because there's so much of this that is like Overwatch that it's easy to just keep the conversation at that level. But if you really spend some time playing this game, you're going to see that there are some profound differences in terms of core underlying mechanics, and collectively they result in a game that is fundamentally different from Overwatch. I'm talking about movement, about feedback, about visual clutter, about pacing, about the damage, health, and healing economy. Personally, I do not believe that Overwatch fans are going to be drawn to this because Marvel Rivals is delivering something that is sloppier and less strategic, providing less room for individual agency and demanding a lower skill cap. This looks like Overwatch, but scratch away at it just a little and you will see that this is absolutely not Overwatch. The third and final layer in this discussion is divorcing ourselves from that Overwatch comparison entirely and just being like, is this fun? Is this going to work? And yeah, I actually firmly believe that this is fun, and I do think it's going to work. I personally don't like this because I need my shooters to feel better than this feels mechanically. But I can absolutely see how it's going to find an audience, given its incredible presentation, its remarkable polish, the genuine tension that can occur in each round, the expansive roster of heroes and villains on offer and how well designed their kits are, and of course the fact that this is Marvel, which holds a tremendous amount of appeal. You want to add Cyclops to this one day? Man, I don't even like this game and even I will log in for that. Marvel Rivals is very derivative and quite sloppy, but it's ultimately fun. And while I don't think it's going to win over any current or lapsed Overwatch fans, I do think it's got a good shot of finding a new audience. People looking for a low stakes, kind of spammy, but fun hero shooter that just so happens to feature some of the most beloved and recognizable heroes and villains across any entertainment medium. Let's deal with the elephant in the room first. Marvel Rivals is just Overwatch with a Marvel skin. That statement is true on multiple levels, absolutely, and anyone who says otherwise is having a laugh. You feel it in the overall structure of the game, which is a 6v6 PvP hero shooter. You feel it in the game modes, which are very often about pushing a payload or capturing a point. You feel it in the hero kits, which we'll talk more about soon, but many of them are essentially remixes of Overwatch kits. You'll feel it in the reliance on super abilities to break stalemates. You'll absolutely feel it in the level design with levels that not only look like Overwatch, but also feel eerily similar in their layouts, their choke points, their elevated spots, etc. The list goes on and on. This project 100% began its life in a boardroom where netties were like, what if Overwatch, but Marvel? And Disney executives were like, hey, we've greenlit worse pitches in our day, let's give this one a crack. The fact that this is 6v6 feels like a very deliberate choice to appeal to that disaffected Overwatch player who wasn't a fan of Overwatch going from 6v6 to 5v5 with Overwatch 2. That was a deeply unpopular decision that felt motivated by a focus on competitive play, and it also resulted in 6-person squads kind of having to drop someone or rotate in and out on a given night. It was so unpopular that just today, as I write this script, Blizzard announced that they were testing a return to the 6v6 format. They are currently testing that at the moment, and based on that feedback, they may make Overwatch a 6v6 game again, completely invalidating one of the main reasons that Overwatch 2 exists as separate from Overwatch 1, cementing its status as one of the most disastrous and most needless sequel launches of all time. Anyway, I digress. The point is, Marvel Rivals is 6v6, and that's almost like putting up a flag saying, hey, remember when Overwatch was good and it was a 6v6 game? Well, that's what we're doing, so come join us. Oddly enough, I don't think 6v6 works here in Marvel Rivals, but we'll come back to that point a little later. Personally, I find the game modes on offer here in Marvel Rivals to be particularly disappointing because they are just an exact copy of Overwatch. The ones I experienced so far are payload push and point capture. They are identical to Overwatch, with you standing on a thing to make it move, choke points in the levels that make it tricky to push, 2 checkpoints that give you more time to reach the final objective, etc., etc. To their credit, these game modes really work and they are fun, because Blizzard spent a lot of time figuring out how to make these work, and Marvel Rivals gets the benefit of all that work, because they can just do the same thing. I played Concord recently, a game I'll talk more about at the back end of this video, and Concord was really well made, but its game modes were kind of boring because they were absent the sort of tense, last-minute, desperate, throw your body on the point and hope for the best kind of moments that make a game like Overwatch so thrilling. Marvel Rivals does have those moments, a lot of them in fact, but that is only because they have copied the exact same game modes that Overwatch had. They have not added anything to those game modes that might enhance them, and they have not added any new game modes to show us something that we haven't seen yet. And that's what's disappointing for me, right? Like, you've got all these heroes and villains, many of which can fly, many of which can leap huge distances and web swing and teleport, many of which come from disparate worlds like Queens and Outer Space and Asgard and Limbo and whatever, and it's like, we're just gonna take all that and then push a payload through Asgard? Like, we couldn't come up with something else, or at least a bit of a spin on something? If you had a great game mode that was doing things that Overwatch wasn't doing, then I'd be able to say, hey, come check out this sick game mode, it totally rules, you can only get it in Marvel Rivals. But I can't do that. All I can say is it's just the same. It's the same as Overwatch, and it's one of the many reasons why I think Marvel Rivals has so little to offer to current or lapsed Overwatch players, because it's just not doing anything that they haven't seen or experienced before. I have the exact same sentiment when it comes to the visual design of levels. Like, if you remove the characters from these levels and just did a fly-through of them, I would honestly guess that these were just Overwatch levels. The visual style that NetEase has arrived at with the game's characters is phenomenal. It's so good, like, genuinely incredible. But none of the same innovative art design has been brought to bear on the look of these levels, which each look like they were made in some sort of Overwatch map maker tool. Same thing goes for layouts and choke points and whatever else, it just feels the same, man, it really does. The big difference when it comes to levels is destructible environments, but I won't talk about that here. I'll talk about that in the next block when we start digging into the stuff that really differentiates this from Overwatch. But spoiler alert, the level destruction stuff is not anywhere near as interesting or as impactful as we might have hoped, and it's a real shame. Hero kits is one area where it's somewhat complicated to talk about the similarities between Overwatch and Marvel Rivals, because there's no single Marvel Rivals character that is a direct copy of an Overwatch character. Star-Lord is a really good example. He has two really rapid-fire guns with incredibly small magazines. They very much feel like Tracer's guns. He also has plenty of mobility options that make him feel like you can quickly zip in and zip out again, just like Tracer, right? So I've seen more than a few people being like, okay, look, it's just, dollar store Tracer, it's the same thing, etc. But it's not. It's definitely not, because Star-Lord can kind of fly, which Tracer certainly can't do. That's more of a Pharah thing. He has an ability that's kind of like Reaper's ultimate, which obviously Tracer doesn't have, that's Reaper's thing. And Star-Lord's ultimate is an aimbot, which is kind of like Soldier 76's thing. The Punisher is also in this game. He has an auto rifle that feels a lot like Soldier 76's gun, sure, but he also can deploy a turret, sort of like Torbjorn, except, he needs to actually sit in the turret to make it work, so it's different. Magneto can cast a big Reinhardt shield in front of him, but the shield only lasts a few seconds, and his main attack is actually a ranged attack based on flinging metal objects at people, kind of making him feel like Zenyatta more than anything else. Do you see what I mean here? No character is one-to-one with an Overwatch character, but almost all of them have one or more elements of their kit that you have seen in an Overwatch character, so heroes start to feel like an Overwatch remix. But to be clear, unlike game modes or level design, I actually don't hold this against NetEase, because I feel like we've long ago reached the sort of hero-shooter singularity where so many ideas have been put into the field that it's natural to expect to see some of them reused. Hell, Concord had plenty of great, innovative character kits that we hadn't seen before, but it also absolutely had a bunch of stuff pulled directly from Overwatch and Apex Legends and Valorant and all that stuff, for sure. The question for Marvel Rivals is the remixing that's going on here enough? These abilities aren't necessarily original, but does the way they've been mixed and matched result in fun hero kits? And the answer is yes, actually. Some of them I like more than others, but mostly they're a good time, with a good spread of abilities that allow you to contribute different things in different moments. No character is just a one-trick pony who can only do one thing. They each have 3 to 4 core capabilities that allow you to make decisions about what you want to do in a given moment, rather than just doing the same thing repeatedly, waiting for a limited number of cooldowns to come back up. So I think these characters are fun to play, sure, but I have a serious problem with how authentic they feel. Magneto is a really good example. He's a tank who can put up a shield. You'd imagine that it'd be like a big tangle of metal or something, right? But no, it's just kind of a hologram that looks exactly like Reinhardt's shield. It's very lame. He can cast a protective shield around himself or others. Again, you imagine that this might be like armor cladding or something, right? But no, it's just a purple bubble. His main attacks just involve flinging little bits of metal at enemies, but he has a team-up move with Scarlet Witch that lets him pull out an enchanted greatsword. okay. Finally, his ultimate is just a big area-wide nuke called Meteor M, even though it's not a meteor, it's just a little ball of junk. Does any of this sound like it's Magneto to you? It doesn't really sound like Magneto to me. Hulk is another example. He is also a tank. That makes sense. It's actually kind of cool. You start out as Banner, and then you transform into the Hulk, and when Hulk loses all of his HP, you turn back into puny Banner, and if you can stay alive long enough, you can transform back into the Hulk. Yes, that is Diva's kit, but thematically it actually works really well for Hulk, so I'm into it. What are Hulk's other abilities, you ask? Well, one of them is Indestructible Guard, where Hulk casts a green gamma bubble around himself and his teammates. Another one is called Radioactive Lockdown, where Hulk is able to instantaneously mobilize a target, making them immune to all ability effects. Does any of that sound like Hulk to you? Loki in this game is a healer, and that's not really Loki's thing. I think about Marvel's Midnight Suns. Now that was a game that really understood the assignment. Didn't like all the young adult novel stuff at the Abbey, but the combat in that game was incredible, predicated on Firaxis' ability to capture perfectly the essence of these heroes and what it would feel like to be them. The fact that they could achieve that within the constraints of being a turn-based strategy game was incredible, and you'd think that Marvel Rivals would have an infinitely easier job to deliver that feeling given that it's a real-time action game. But it's absolutely not the case. The starting point for many of these hero kits are not the heroes or villains themselves. The starting point was, what abilities do we need to include to arrive at a balanced hero shooter sandbox, and how can we squeeze those abilities onto specific characters, regardless of whether or not it makes sense or feels authentic. It's not always the case, mind you. For example, Iron Man and Star-Lord and Storm all feel great, like they really captured the essence of those heroes. But there's definitely a critical mass of heroes and villains who have kits that do not feel like they truly belong to that character. In a way, it makes Marvel Rivals feel like even more of an Overwatch clone, as though it's straining to fit these iconic characters into an Overwatch-shaped whole, when really these characters are already so large in our imagination that it feels frustrating to see them so constrained. Like, I'm sorry, but Hulk is not a character who should be paralyzing people and rendering them invulnerable. Hulk should not be casting protective bubbles on his teammates. Hulk, smash! It cannot be any clearer than that, so I really don't know what we're doing here. And I think that's a pretty crucial point to end this block on. I actually believe that the concept of a hero shooter starring Marvel characters is pretty cool. I'm super down for that, and that's one of the reasons I was really hyped going into this playtest. But I've already played a lot of Overwatch in the past, and I stopped playing that because I was done with it. And if I was to return for a similar experience, I'd need it to be doing some new things. It's one of the things that appealed to me about Concord, because I do think that despite its many issues, it was trying to carve out its own niche within the hero shooter genre. Some elements were borrowed from this game or that, sure, but it still felt like a distinct offering that was trying to do something that hadn't quite been done in the same way before. Marvel Rivals has no such ambition. It really is just trying to do everything that Overwatch is doing except with Marvel characters. I suspect that that'll be enough for some people because, like I said, yeah, it's fun, but it's not enough for me. And I don't think it's going to be enough for actual Overwatch fans, because when you really start spending time with this game and seeing how it actually plays, you're going to find out that it's actually quite different from Overwatch, and very rarely are those differences an improvement. So the starting point for this block is to understand that what makes Overwatch Overwatch is not just what it is, but how good a job it does of being what it is. The quality bar that Blizzard hit with Overwatch was astounding, and I can't comment on how much that's degraded since launch, since I stopped playing years ago, but at launch, this was an absolutely incredibly made video game. Just the feel of it alone was superb. Basic hygiene factors like movement, jumping, dashing, the different weight and speed of each character, how tactile they felt to control, all of it was a 10 out of 10. And then you get to the gunplay and the abilities, which also felt incredible, whether it was Hanzo's arrows or Genji's throwing styles or Tracer's pistols or Hannah's sniper rifle, all of it just felt so crisp. The feedback that you got when you shot something was totally on point. And then you get to the melee stuff, and this is really tricky because first-person melee is hard to pull off and even harder to make feel good, but Blizzard found a way to do it. When you swung that hammer as Reinhardt and it connected, you felt that shit. It just felt fucking good. Hell, even hitting that turret as Torbjorn also felt great. That is how much Blizzard nailed all of that stuff. Biggest issue with Marvel Rivals right now, and the biggest thing that separates it from Overwatch, is that it is not remotely close to the bar set by Blizzard. Even with its best characters and its best moments, it does not provide anywhere near the same level of mechanical satisfaction that Overwatch does. Whether it's movement, traversal, shooting, but particularly melee, it just feels significantly worse. And even forgetting about the comparison, Marvel Rivals just has some basic issues with feedback. weapon recoil is non-existent, projectiles that should be visible are kind of invisible, the hit marker visuals and sound effects lack impact. It just doesn't feel satisfying to shoot stuff. But it feels even worse to melee things. It always feels like you're just swinging your weapon, never actually hitting anything. Even when you are actually dealing damage, it still just feels like you are shadowboxing rather than striking an actual target. And that really matters here in Marvel Rivals because there are quite a few melee characters, and it bums me out to say that none of them feel good to play because netties have not been able to figure out how to make melee combat work from a feedback perspective. You can deal a lot of damage as a melee character, absolutely. It just feels sloppy and messy while you're doing it. So that's kind of the first point. Overall game feel is not where it needs to be, and it's leagues behind Overwatch. The second thing that really distinguishes these two games is their pacing and rhythm. So 12 characters on the map at once has some big flow-on impacts. It means that there's more damage and healing going out, more people attacking you, more people to attack, a greater need to reposition regularly because you keep getting jumped, etc. Marvel Rivals feels incredibly frantic and relentless in a way that I don't personally enjoy. I can see why someone else might like it if they want absolutely no downtime when playing a competitive experience, but I just found this so frantic that it left me no time to kind of just think strategically. It's also just a little bit exhausting, and the runbacks after death were kind of a nice break from the relentlessness of it all. This is further exacerbated by cooldown timers on abilities, which are generally really short, and the number of abilities at your disposal is really high, with some characters having like 4 to 6 different things that can be thrown at you at any one point in time. This is even further exacerbated by the super timers, which are very short. Like, yeah, they really charge fast to the point where it almost feels like they're another regular move on a longer cooldown rather than an actual super. So this game moves really fast and it never lets up. In terms of pacing, it is a very different experience to Overwatch, and honestly, it's kind of the most frantic hero shooter that I can think of. Again, I think that'll appeal to some, but it personally does not appeal to me. Visual clarity. Okay, so this is a problem. I've definitely seen other people talking about this already. Another byproduct of 6v6 is that you have 12 bodies on the field, all throwing out abilities on really short cooldowns, some of which leave shit on the ground like Rocket's contraptions, and Groot who can drop walls absolutely everywhere, and Loki who can make clones of himself. It's a lot, man. It's definitely visual overload. I suspect the pacing question might be a matter of taste, but I'm pretty sure the issue of visual clarity is just a straight up problem. It makes the battlefield very hard to pass, and it further adds to how spammy all of this can feel. All of these issues, from sloppy game feel to frantic pacing to this lack of visual clarity, have the net effect of reducing individual agency on the battlefield. And I mean that both actively and reactively. Actively, it's really hard to go in behind enemy lines and get an important pick because it's hard enough to find your target, but when you do manage to catch them, there's so much healing going out that it's tricky to burst down your target. So often you'll find yourself just throwing out projectiles into the great mass, hoping that something lands, because unless your super is up, you don't have a lot of ability to make big game-changing plays very often. Reactively, there is a serious absence of information about where you are being hit from and what type of damage you're receiving, and given that there's so much going on in any moment, by the time you do figure it out, you're almost always already dead. The thing about Overwatch is that it isn't just a hero shooter, it's also an extremely well-made competitive experience. Its mechanics are deep and refined enough that they give extremely high-skilled players the room to shine. The pacing is perfectly balanced, giving you some breathing room for strategic thinking, allowing you to prepare for those incredibly tense, frantic, nail-biting pushes or defenses. Its health, damage, and healing economies are finely tuned to give you plenty of individual agency, but also heavily incentivized team play. Marvel Rivals does not live in these finer details. It's so much more frantic and overwhelming, so much more visually intense, so much more focused on throughput rather than surgical interventions. It's still fun, for sure, as I've said at many points throughout this video, but it's a very different type of fun to Overwatch. Despite the surface level similarities, these are different games that I think will appeal to different people, and that's okay. But I don't think that shorthanding this as just Overwatch with Marvel skins is right, because it doesn't properly unpack just how different these experiences are, and I also think it sells Marvel Rivals short, because separate from all of these comparisons that we might make to Overwatch, there's some really, really fantastic parts of this package that deserve to be acknowledged, and that are really going to impress people when they experience them. Marvel Rivals is stunningly polished for a beta. Like, I am blown away by how good this looks, how well it runs, how expansive its day one roster is, how interesting some of the mechanics are, and how many supporting user experience systems are shipping on day one. Like, again, Concord, man, that is a package that feels really bare bones and not at all ready to go when it launches in like 3 weeks or whatever. I'm 100% certain that you could launch Marvel Rivals tomorrow and it would do very well. Like, this thing is 110% ready to go, no exaggeration, other than the balance stuff, but that's always the way with this sort of thing. The first thing you will no doubt experience is the visual design of the characters, which is really, really, really good. Like, damn, man, genuinely some fantastic renditions of these heroes that feels visually cohesive across the whole roster while still feeling like so much care and detail has been poured into each and every individual character. The design of each character is one thing, but then there's the line work on them, since this game has made a really deliberate choice to use those thick, heavy lines to define the characters. And then there's the coloring, which really leans into the comic book aesthetic. It's not Borderlands level cell shading, but it's giving that vibe, and it just looks so good. NetEase are going to sell so many skins here, because if even these basic starter outfits look this good, I can't imagine how good the paid stuff is going to be. It's going to be wild. But even the little flourishes in the menu stand out. Like, when you mouse over a character, not only does it do a nice little animation thing, but you can also move your mouse and they will actually follow you as they do that. It's such a tiny thing, it makes no difference whatsoever, but it's a sign of just how much work NetEase have put into this to make it really pop. When you click on a character to learn more about them, a full-blown animation plays that just looks cool. That's its only job, just to look cool, and it's totally crushing it. There's a really clear breakdown of abilities, including an instructional video for each one, plus also a suggested combo video showing you how you might want to combine all of your abilities to be really effective. That's on top of a basic tutorial mode that'll get you started, and a practice mode where you can play either solo in a shooting range or against AI bots. There's also custom games on day one. It took Bungie like 5 years to add this to Destiny 1, and then like another 4 years to add them to Destiny 2, and Rivals ships them on day one. That's not all though. Did you know there's an in-game tournament system here? It lets you create clans, which are called factions. There's a whole in-game setup for that, and then you can enter the tournaments that NetEase hosts. They've also said they plan to offer some sort of factional certification, hinting at the possibility for larger esports leagues. It's just mind-blowing that all of this is in on day one. You know what else it has? Kill cams, which is a feature that precious few new shooters are shipping with these days. But more than that, it actually has highlight replays that you can pull up for every member of your team at the end of a round. You just click on their character in the score screen after a match, and you can watch a highlight of their best play. Did NetEase need to add this feature? No. Will many people use it? Probably not. But is it awesome? Yes, it absolutely is. So these are all fantastic flourishes and auxiliary systems added to the game, but what about more gameplay-centric stuff? Well, the thing I love most about Marvel Rivals is its roster of heroes and villains. Sure, you've got some predictable picks in there like Hulk and Spider-Man and Iron Man and Venom, etc., but you've also got Storm and the Punisher and Magic and Mantis and Penny Parker and Adam Warlock. I'm sure it would have been so tempting for this entire lineup to just be the MCU frontline heroes or whatever, and I'm sure we'll get all of them eventually, but I really like that we get some outside picks here. Much respect for that. What makes these picks even more interesting is the team-up system. So the way this works is that there are various combinations of heroes, and if you meet those combination requirements, then you unlock additional abilities that provide a significant boost to those characters working together. So for example, if you have Groot and Rocket on the same team, Rocket can then climb onto Groot's shoulders, and Rocket gets a significant damage mitigation buff. If you play with Rocket and Punisher on the same team, Rocket will drop a special ammo box that will massively increase Punisher's rate of fire and give him infinite ammo, so he never has to reload his gun. This is devastatingly potent, it is not a minor buff, and you absolutely need to respond to it when this sort of team up is deployed. There are over a dozen of these unique team-ups in the game right now, with the promise of plenty more to be added with each new addition to the roster. It's really smart because it works for duos and triplets, which is often how people play these games because it's rare to have a team of 6 friends ready to go all the time. With this system, you can party up with 1 or 2 mates and get some real benefit out of synergizing your picks. It's funny because Concord actually tried to do something similar to this with this party buff system, but that system is so bad and so badly explained and so badly surfaced in the UI. The system here in Marvel Rivals is the perfect example of how to get something like this right, though they definitely have some balance issues to work through with some of these team-ups. In the game's marketing, much fanfare has been made of the game's destructible environments. Seems like it would be a pretty big deal in a genre like this, but to be honest, it's actually pretty toothless here. Any character can destroy the structures that are destructible, and so these structures always crumble because they always just get caught in the crossfire and the collateral damage or whatever. You never really use this stuff strategically like you would in Rainbow Six Siege or in a Battlefield game. It's a gimmick, sadly, but it shouldn't be, and this idea actually has a lot of potential. Like, if you had certain heroes who could destroy structures while others couldn't, you'd have a real incentive to pick them, and you could design more interesting opportunities that emerge when structures are destroyed. This is, at a foundational level, a really good idea that I hope Marvel Rivals evolves further, because as I said, right now it's just very unimpactful and an ignorable gimmick. So even though that system isn't working yet, it's still got potential, and it's one of the many things that Marvel Rivals has got going for it. And given how up and down this Impressions video has been, I kind of want to finish by driving that point home. So I've tried to cover a fair amount of ground in this video. The first block was really exploring those similarities to Overwatch, and I made the point that I do think it's disappointing that Marvel Rivals is so one-to-one with Overwatch in so many areas, because I think this would have been a better, more appealing game if it were more adventurous with its hero abilities, game modes, and visual design. But still, the Overwatch formula is popular for a reason, and by copying those elements, Marvel Rivals has built a foundation that can deliver the same sort of tension and excitement that Overwatch does. As I've said many times before, it's a fun game. It definitely is. In the second block, I was really trying to go a level deeper to showcase that this isn't just Overwatch with Marvel characters, and that fundamentally, this is a game that cannot compete with the level of mechanical depth that Overwatch provides. It's messier here, it's more frantic, it's spammier. Again, it is still fun, but I think people who really love or loved Overwatch are going to feel that absence of mechanical refinement, and as such, I don't expect this will convert many current or lapsed Overwatch fans. However, I do think this has a good shot of pulling in a new audience, attracted to that sort of frenetic fun. I think the team-up system is really inspired, specifically welcoming in the majority of people who play with one or two friends at a time rather than a full squad, and given how important social bonds are in these sorts of games, that system could go a long way towards keeping people invested. I think the tournament and faction systems are a direct invitation to competitive-minded players, and while I question whether this game's mechanics would work in a truly competitive esports setting, the more casual competitive scene could really thrive here with these sorts of embedded systems. Most importantly, when it comes to attracting new players, it's Marvel, and let's be real, that has a lot of pull both right now and into the future. They're going to make more MCU movies, they're going to make more animated series, more comic book crossover events, and each of those is an excuse to run some sort of in-game promotion, like, you know, watch the new Deadpool movie to unlock Wolverine as a playable character in-game, hit max level on the Battle Pass, and get a free month subscription to Marvel Unlimited, Marvel's digital comics platform. The possibilities are as infinite as the multiverse, and from a business model perspective, you can see this one having serious potential, especially given that this is free to play. But none of that would matter if this wasn't fun, and it is. Despite its many issues, I still had a good time playing this. I don't want to play any more of it unless some of its core elements get a significant rework, but I have no problem telling you that this is a fun time and a hell of a starting point for a live service. If NetEase and Marvel stick with this one over the long term and keep chipping away at those issues while working to define a more distinctive identity separate from Overwatch, I think this could be a really great game that could have a lot of staying power. If I were a betting man, I would be going long on this one, and given how many live service flops we've seen over the past few years, it's nice to see one that feels like it's got a real shot at success. So that's a look at Marvel Rivals, and if you're at all still interested in checking it out, you may want to think about doing so on a GPU from this video's sponsor, Nvidia. We all know Nvidia at this point, they are the undisputed market leaders in GPU technology, and that's for the simple reason that they put out the absolute best product, both in terms of their hardware and the advanced AI-enabled technology tools that push that hardware to new heights. It starts with that hardware though. GeForce RTX 40 series GPUs deliver the raw processing power that enables faster frame rates, higher settings, and advanced settings like ray tracing. Black Myth Wukong, for example, game will support full ray tracing, a setting that delivers the most realistic rendition of light that's possible in a video game. Not many games support this, but the ones that do look incredible, and GeForce RTX GPUs let you experience this game-changing setting. But NVIDIA GPUs aren't just about their hardware, they're also about the proprietary technology that NVIDIA uses to push that hardware even further. One of the most powerful tools that GeForce RTX 40 series GPUs support is DLSS 3. This actually uses AI to insert additional frames in between those that are natively rendered by your GPU. In many games, this will literally double and sometimes triple your frame rate, no joke. I mean, let's talk about Marvel Rivals. So native rendering, DLSS off, you're looking at around 60 FPS on a high-end PC. However, if you are playing on a 40 series GPU with DLSS 3 enabled, you're going to be able to push upwards of 200 frames per second. These numbers were provided by NVIDIA before the beta went live, but then I tested them for myself when I was playing the beta, and they were 100% accurate. You really are more than tripling your frame rate with DLSS 3. That's not all though, because the other thing that Marvel Rivals supports is NVIDIA Reflex. This is technology that works with supported monitors to reduce input lag, something that is super important for competitive games like MOBAs or hero shooters like Marvel Rivals. If you want to squeeze out every milliseconds of response time out of your hardware to give you a competitive edge, then NVIDIA 40 series GPUs allow you to do just that. More and more games are supporting DLSS as developers see how much performance uplift it can bring. Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail, for example, now supports DLSS 2, making it easier to play at higher resolutions and higher settings. Just earlier this week, I reviewed Kineitsugami Path of the Goddess that supports DLSS 3 and NVIDIA Reflex, giving you a massive boost in frames and crisp, responsive gameplay for that truly excellent title. I really recommend that one. PC gaming is at its absolute best with AI-powered NVIDIA DLSS, so if you'd like to learn more about these games and this technology, then I've left a link to NVIDIA's DLSS page below. Thanks NVIDIA for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.